With Overwatch reinventing itself, High got flaming out almost instantly, and Concord becoming one of the clearest cautionary tales in modern gaming. One thing is obvious: live service games are not going away. If anything, the industry is still doubling down. And you can see why. The global games market closed 2025 at around $188.8 billion, and industry forecasts expected to climb past $200 billion within the next few years. Publishers are still chasing games that can hold players for years instead of just a launch window. But before we go further, what actually is a live service game? At its core, a live service game is built to survive, evolve, and monetize long after launch. These are games designed around ongoing online engagement, new seasons, new heroes, new maps, new story beats, balanced patches, events, battle passes, microtransactions, sometimes even subscriptions. Final Fantasy XIV is a perfect example of that last one. The dream is simple: build a game people do not just buy, but live inside. The reality is brutal, because making a live service hit is not just hard. It's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle while 5 other studios are trying to do the same thing, with bigger budgets and already established communities. And that is why the same question keeps coming up. Why do these studios keep chasing this model when so many of these games fail? To understand that, you have to look at the winners. Fortnite became more than a game, it became a platform. Apex Legends took the Battle Royale boom and introduced a ping system so elegant that half the genre copied it. Destiny fused looter-shooter gunplay with MMO-style progression and raid culture. Genshin Impact proved gacha could scale globally. Helldivers 2 showed that even in a saturated market, a game with a strong identity and a strong co-op loop can still break through. Then you have newer examples. Marvel Rivals has carved out a space by finally giving players a true superhero team shooter that goes toe-to-toe with Overwatch. Arc Raiders became one of the clearest examples of a new live service game actually punching through, reaching 14 million sales worldwide by February 2026, with around 6 million weekly active users and a peak of roughly 960,000 concurrent players in January. So yes, the dream is still alive, but most studios are not building Fortnite. They are building the next game that gets compared to Fortnite, and unfortunately meets its demise. In spite of this, there are still winners in this market, and let's start with Destiny. When Destiny launched in 2014, Bungie was coming off Halo, one of the most successful shooter franchises of all time. Expectations were massive. What they delivered was something the industry had not really seen at that scale before: a shared world shooter that blended MMO progression with first-person gunplay. At launch, Destiny was rough, and the story was criticized, content felt thin, and the endgame loop was unclear. But Bungie did something important. They listened and they iterated. Then came the Taken King expansion in 2015 that changed everything. It reworked systems, added meaningful endgame content, improved loot, and gave players a reason to stay. This is where Destiny really became a live service success story. Not because it launched perfectly, but because it evolved. By the time Destiny 2 launched in 2017, Bungie tried to reset the experience. They streamlined systems, simplified builds, and made the game world more accessible. But in doing so, they removed a lot of the depth that core players loved. Again, the game struggled, and again, Bungie adapted. The Forsaken expansion in 2018 is widely considered the turning point for Destiny 2. It brought back the complexity, introduced the Dreaming City, added Gambit as a PvPvE mode, and rebuilt player trust. But Destiny's biggest strength is also its biggest problem: content demand. Destiny is a game that requires constant feeding, new expansions, new seasons, new weapons, new systems, and over time, that created one of the most controversial decisions Bungie ever made: the Destiny Content Vault. Entire campaigns, locations, and activities were removed from the game to manage file size and development complexity. At the same time, Bungie leaned heavily into seasonal models and paid expansions. The game shifted fully into a live service economy, and this is where fatigue starts to set in. Right now, the numbers show a visible decline on Steam. Destiny 2 is sitting at roughly 7,600 average players over the last 30 days or so, down significantly from late 2025 peaks. That does not mean Destiny is dead, but it does mean even one of the best live service games ever made is vulnerable to fatigue. Because the moment players feel like the game is no longer evolving fast enough, they start to drift. And once they drift, it's very hard to bring them back. Apex Legends is another perfect case study. When it launched in 2019, it did not follow the traditional marketing cycle. It shadow dropped, and within a month it reached 50 million players. But the growth was not just luck. Apex solved real problems in the battle royale genre. The ping system changed multiplayer communication. The movement system made traversal feel fluid and skill-based. And the hero system gave each character identity without breaking the core gameplay. It was familiar, but it was refined. Apex went on to generate over 3.4 billion in lifetime net bookings, proving it was not just a hit, but a sustainable business. But then came the reality of live service: repetition. In a game like Apex, players repeat the same loop endlessly: drop, loot, fight, reset. And over time, that loop started to feel stale. Cheating became a persistent issue. Rank systems felt unrewarding. Content updates felt incremental instead of transformative. And key members of the original development team moved on. And yet, Apex proved something important. Decline is not always death. Recent updates and systems reworks have brought players back. The game is still averaging around 100,000 players with peaks above 260,000. A live service game does not need to be perfect, but it does need to keep earning your time. Then there's Overwatch. When Overwatch launched in 2016, it did not just enter the superhero shooter space, it defined it. Blizzard combined strong character design, clear visual readability, tight gameplay, and polished team-based mechanics into something that felt instantly iconic. Overwatch was not just a competitive shooter, it was a universe. The characters had personality, the world had identity, and the game had cultural weight. At its peak, Overwatch had over 50 million players, won Game of the Year in 2016, and became one of Blizzard's most important franchises. But Overwatch also shows how fragile live service success can be, because success in this space is not just about gameplay, it is about trust. When Overwatch 2 was announced, it came with a major promise: a fully developed PvE experience with skill trees, story progression, and replayable missions that would expand the Overwatch universe beyond competitive multiplayer. That promise became the foundation of the sequel, and then it collapsed. In 2023, Blizzard confirmed that the original PvE vision had scaled back significantly, and the debut progression system were cancelled. What players were left with was not the game that had been sold. At the time, Overwatch 2 introduced other major changes. The game shifted from 6v6 to 5v5, fundamentally altering the team composition and gameplay flow. The loot box system was removed and replaced with a battle pass and an in-game store, introducing higher priced cosmetics and a more aggressive monetization model. Individually, these changes could have worked. Together, they created friction. But one of the most controversial decisions was this: players who were dissatisfied with Overwatch 2 could not go back. Blizzard merged the original Overwatch into Overwatch 2, effectively replacing it entirely. There was no legacy version, no rollback option, no alternative for players who prefer the original format. That meant if you did not like the changes, your only real option was to leave. And many players did, because once trust is broken in a live service game, it's very difficult to rebuild. Players do not just leave because the game is bad, they leave because they are no longer believing in where it's going. And for a while, Overwatch lost that belief. Engagement dropped, community sentiment declined, and the game that once defined the genre started reacting to it instead. Then came 2026. Blizzard made a decisive shift. They dropped the 2 branding, signaling a return to identity rather than an iteration. They released 5 new heroes in a single season, dramatically increasing content cadence. They also began rebalancing the game more aggressively, adjusting heroes faster and responding to player feedback in shorter cycles. But the most telling part was not just what they did, it was why. Overwatch leadership openly acknowledged that Marvel Rivals influenced this shift in direction. That is a major moment because it shows that even a genre-defining game is no longer leading the conversation. It is reacting to newer competitors who are moving faster. And that is the real reason. Live service games do not just compete on quality, they compete on momentum. If you stop evolving, you fall behind. If you break trust, players leave. And if both happen at the same time, even a game as strong as Overwatch can struggle to hold its place. And when you look at Destiny, Apex Legends, and Overwatch together, a pattern starts to emerge. Not one of these games failed overnight. In fact, they did not really fail at all. They just drifted slowly. And that brings us to the real barrier. It's not money, it's time. A live service game is not just a purchase, it is a lifestyle commitment. If you have spent years on one game, building progress, buying content, and forming friendships, you are not leaving easily. These games build social gravity. Your progress matters, your skins matter, your memories matter, your friend groups matter. That is what new games are competing against, not just attention, but habit. That brings us to Concord. Concord is one of the clearest recent examples of what happens when a live service game enters the market without a strong enough reason to exist. Sony halted sales and issued refunds less than 2 weeks after launch. The game repeatedly sold fewer than 25,000 copies and peaked at just 697 players on Steam. That is catastrophic. And the problem was not just that it was bad, it was that it felt unnecessary. In the live service space, fine can equate to death. If your game does not give players a reason to leave what they already love, it will not survive. Highguard tells a similar story. On paper, it had potential. It combined fast-paced shooter mechanics with mobility-focused combat, and it leaned into a competitive, high-skill ceiling experience that should have appealed to fans of those type of games. But the problem started before the players even touched the game. Its reveal at the Game Awards 2025 set the tone, and not in a good way. And to be fair, when you are the final review at the Game Awards, you are going to get the full Jeff Keighley treatment. The music swells, the light dims, and suddenly, this is not just a game, it is the next big thing. That kind of hype can carry a game or can bury it. The issue was expectation. Players came in expecting something groundbreaking, something that would immediately stand out in an already crowded space. Instead, they got a new IP that felt familiar without feeling distinct enough. The reaction was immediate. Confusion, frustration, and a wave of negative sentiment that spread across social media and content creators. And in live service, perception is everything. By the time the game launched, it was already fighting an uphill battle. Then came the actual experience. Players pointed out issues with matchmaking, balance, and the lack of meaningful progression systems. The core gameplay loop did not feel rewarding enough to sustain long sessions, and there was not enough content variety to keep players engaged, so the numbers dropped quickly. Highguard peaked at around 100,000 players and lost a significant portion of its player base within the first week. That kind of drop-off is not just bad at a bad launch, it is a failure across key stages of a live service game. Perception, experience, retention, because that is the real test. Not whether players show up on day 1, but whether they come back on day 2, day 7, day 30, day 365. Highguard did not fail because it had no ideas. It struggled because it never fully earned players' trust, and did not give players a strong enough reason to stay. So it leaves to ask you the question, why do publishers keep doing this anyway? Because when it works, it really works. One successful live service game can generate revenue for years. That recurring revenue is what executives are chasing. But that chase has consequences. Studios get pushed into genres they are not built for. Projects get cancelled, and sometimes entire teams disappear. Concord and Highguard are simply not alone. Spellbreak brought Magic into the Battle Royale space, letting players combine elemental gauntlets to create unique spell interactions mid-fight. X-Defiant leaned into fast arcade-style gunplay with faction-based abilities pulled from Ubisoft's biggest franchises. Anthem gave players one of the best flight systems ever put into a video game, making movement feel powerful and fluid in a way few games have matched. Foam Stars tried to remix the shooter formula entirely, turning foam into both a weapon and a traversal system. And yet, all of them failed or faded. The pattern is clear. A cool idea is not enough. A flashy reveal is not enough. A famous publisher is not enough. You need a fun, repeatable loop. You need identity. You need content cadence. You need technical stability. You need social stickiness. And you need all of that immediately. And now, new games are stepping into that same pressure. Marathon is entering into a crowded space, carrying the weight of Bungie's legacy and the expectations that come with it. But it is not arriving without challenges. Early conversations around the game have already been shaped by controversy, from accusations of plagiarized visual assets to debates around its pricing model at launch. And in a genre where perception forms quickly, that matters. Because live service games are judged before they are even fully experienced. Marathon is not competing in a vacuum. It is competing against years of player investments, established communities, and a genre that has become far less forgiving. And that is the real challenge, not just launching a good game, but proving quickly that it deserves to survive. To conclude, I think it's fair to say that live service games are not going anywhere. The upside is too big, but the market is ruthless. Player time is limited, and not every game gets a second chance. So the real question is not whether studios will keep chasing lightning. They will. We all know that. The real question is how many will get burnt trying to catch it. This is Walkers92, signing out.